Okay, welcome back to the revision series. Something slightly different today. I'm going to talk about reading comprehension papers, primarily year 6 or secondary school reading comprehension, but I think these tips will go all the way up to kind of GCSE level or at least later secondary school. One of the great things about reading is, not literal reading, but reading for a test, is that the skills that you get in primary school are applicable all the way up through secondary as well. So if we can refine those skills when we're younger and we get the tactics right early, those tactics are still going to be useful all the way through school, I suppose, in university as well. Whereas with maths or maybe grammar, you need to know specifics for your particular year group. And you're not going to know secondary school, you're not going to have the upper secondary school skills, GCSE and A-level skills at primary level. With reading comprehension, you can. So these tips in places, slightly controversial, but bear with me. So I'll talk about primary school first and then we'll move on. So in year 6, it's a SATs reading paper is 1 hour long. And within that, you have 3 texts and 3 sets of questions. So you've got 3 different texts, which you can read through, 3 sets of questions, and each one of the questions that you get could be up to 3 marks, but usually the 3 markers are kept until the second and third texts. Okay, this is the controversial tip that I don't think too many teachers would agree with me on, but whatever. My tip 1 is don't read the text first. So in a SATs paper, you have 3 relatively long texts. I'll show you one of them. If I click down to one of the texts here, so this is not all of the final text of a SATs paper. So you got a whole page there, you got a whole page there. There's a little bit more that I've cut off for the sake of the video. It's quite a lot of reading though. And if we look back to how long a SATs reading paper is, 1 hour long, and you've got 3 texts with 3 sets of questions. That means you have 20 minutes to read and answer a number of questions on a text. Most people's guide would be to read through the text first, read it all in, try and absorb what you can, then answer the questions. What I found then, I've tested this with my class, is that the children will start reading. It will take them anywhere from about 4 to about 7 or 8 minutes to read through that individual text. Now that's 4 to 7 minutes out of 20 minutes in total to answer that text. So we're taking way too long there to read the text, look at the questions, and then have time to answer the questions. You're going to miss out on stuff there. So my recommendation, I don't know if I can use my pen here, my recommendation is to not read the text first. Look straight away at the questions and then go and find the answers in the text. Using your skimming and scanning skills, I think is more important than trying to absorb it. Because how many times have we all read a couple of pages of a book and then completely forgotten what's gone on in that page? I couldn't tell you exactly what someone was wearing or what somebody said or the look on their face from 3 pages back. But that's what we're expecting children to do if we get them to read the text first and then look at the questions. So my suggestion is look at the question and then go find that. But we build the skill of finding the answer in the text. That's the real key. If you can build that skill, you can find those answers really quickly. And I will show you some examples of that. So tip number 2 is keep all answers really simple. So I would suggest you actually read a mark scheme yourself and remember this when you're answering the questions. So it's very difficult. Sometimes you're answering practice papers at home. Maybe you're doing mock papers and you're handing them into school. You're getting scores back, but you're not entirely sure. Why you're scoring what you're scoring, what you were doing correct and what you were doing incorrectly. So what I would suggest for SATs at year 6 or for GCSEs, look at past papers, but more importantly, look at the mark schemes. I think you'll find that the mark schemes are more forgiving than you'd imagine, but you start to understand how to play the game, exactly what the mark scheme is looking for. And one of the things I've really noticed after years and years and years of teaching SATs and reading comprehension in general is that the mark scheme is actually really simple. You don't need to overcomplicate it. You make a simple point and you back it up with evidence. So have a look at the mark schemes. They're all online. You can look at any SATs mark scheme. You can look at GCSE's past papers, all of that. Look at the mark scheme as well as the questions. Final tip number 3, don't fear the 3-mark questions, or if you're working at secondary school level, don't fear the bigger questions. You can have 10-mark questions, you can have massive questions, but you can complete them in a couple of sentences at 3-mark level anyway, maybe not the 10 markers. But if you just make a simple point and back it up with a quote from the text. That's it. That's all you need to do. It's really simple. I think people overcomplicate it by they put their own thoughts in there as well. They put their own general knowledge into reading comprehension, which is not what you want. Or they try to pick out a specific word and just make it overcomplicated, trying to use thesaurus thinking and I don't know, do I want to describe this house as old? Or do I describe it as dilapidated? Do I describe it as... And you're trying to find this perfect word. Just keep it simple. If it seems like the house is old, describe it as old. Quote something from the text. Make another markable point. You've got to be quite light on your feet in these reading comprehensions. Make a simple point, back it up, move on. I'll give you a really good example of this. It is going to involve a house being old. See if I can write on here. So here's the question. And as per my instructions or guidance, we're going to read the question first, then we're going to find the answers in the text. So it says, what impressions do you get of Piper's house? So impressions, which basically what do you think? What is it like? Of Piper's house. We've got to find that it's Piper's house. Give 2 impressions. That's good. So we've got one here, room for one here, with evidence from the text, and we're going to quote something. And then we've got impression 2 and quote something. And you'll notice down here it's a 3 marker. So if we basically get something correct in 3 of those boxes, we get 3 marks with an extra potential there. So we have room to get something wrong, to either not back something up with evidence or to get something slightly off. But it is forgiving in that way. You don't need to fill every one of these boxes with something accurate. So we want 2 things we think the house is like, backed up with evidence. So let's look at our text. Okay, so skim. Micah brought the music box to her on the meteor storm. Piper never slept. Debris from other worlds from the sky. Restlessness kept her awake in bed. Okay, so we're in Piper's house here, staring at the slanted ceiling of her house, okay? Just counted the widening cracks. So I would say something like poor condition here. Widening cracks, poor condition. Sorry about my handwriting. Poor condition or old, keep it simple. Tarnished silver, cotton nightdress, father's old boots, open the door, wind blew a harsh breath of snow. Okay, nothing about the house. Micah, let me in. That's your own fault, most scrappers. I'm skimming through the text trying to find something about Piper's house. I'm not interested in Micah or Piper themselves. Piper moved to let him in. Okay, so back in the house, then shut the door. He ran to the cast iron stove to warm his hands. Great, that will do. Immediately ran to the cast iron stove to warm his hands. It's warm, cozy maybe. Keep it nice and simple. Piper nudged him aside and adjusted the controls. Hand me a log before you make yourself at home. It was a habit to pretend to be bothered by her friend. Okay, so we've got a couple of things already. I'm just going to look down here. Okay, that's a good quote. Before I made a comfortable nest in the middle of my bed. That could go for our cozy as well. Piper tended to the stove, then she went to the window and looked out at the sky, which had begun to lighten. Moon was sickly greenish. Piper's skin itched. It was too cold outside. She lit an extra kerosene lamp and placed it on the small kitchen table. Piston rings, bolts and cylinders littered its surface, so we can have that as well, actually. Messy or untidy or small. Got to make sure that, and the really key point is that we're not making the same point twice. So I wouldn't make point 1 small and the second point cramped because they're kind of the same thing. So you want 2 distinct things that you're saying. I'm not going to spend too long. I'm not going to go through all the rest of it because we've got enough to be getting on with. So I've got messy, untidy, small here, and poor condition, old, warm and cozy. I like the warm and cozy to start with because we've got quite a bit there. So I would put the impression. I'm going to say cozy. Keep it simple. Doesn't matter if it's a little informal. What's the evidence I'm going to use to prove that it's warm and cozy? Micah ran to the cast iron stove to warm his hands. This suggests a warm and cozy house. Okay, nice and simple. Gone with cozy. The other I'm going to say is okay, small kitchen table, wishes she had a bigger workspace, one she didn't also have to eat at. I like that quote. I'm going to go with small. Again, simple word that is likely to be on a mark scheme. I'm going to go with small. So my evidence here is Piper eats and works at the same table. This suggests she has limited space. My handwriting is rubbish. Writing on a graphic tablet is pretty hard. It's rubbish anyway, by the way. But what I would also do is you can overquote as well. So I would say, wishing she had a bigger workspace. I'd drop that in. You can write over the boxes. I'd quote down the bottom, wishing she had a bigger work space. As long as you don't write over any barcodes, you can overwrite a little bit, but it just shows you found a quote for both. So cozy, Micah ran to the cast iron stove to warm his hands. This suggests a warm and cozy house. Keep it really simple. You've made a point here and you've backed it with evidence. You've quoted directly from the text. Always good. So you've got two markable points. Potentially, if it's in the mark scheme, 1, 2. Small is totally different than cozy. I mean, cozy and warm in a comfortable sense. Small, we're talking about the size of it, and we've quoted completely different things. So small, if it's in the mark scheme, just saying that and it being one of the acceptable points on the mark scheme would be a mark. And then acceptable evidence for that. Piper eats and works at the same table. That's a really good way to support that it's small. Got to do everything on one table in the kitchen. This suggests she has limited space. So make the point crystal clear. And if you have time and you're at the end of the paper, which you kind of nearly at here, I would put in quotes, wishing she had a bigger workspace. That really drives home the point that it is small. So there's 4 markable points that I can see there, but I'll show you a mark scheme to describe in even more detail what I mean. Have a look. So here are all the options you can have. So you could have rickety and old, could have small and tiny. So we've got that. Could have warm and cozy. Yes, we've got cozy. Could have untidy and cluttered. That was another one that we were looking at as well. Could have old-fashioned, even as a separate point to old. So they're quite close. Isolated, and it is safe. So you notice how simple all these words are. Rickety or old. And then the likely evidence, it's not exactly what you have to put, but it could be. It's old, they're widening cracks in the planks in the ceiling. That was one of the first things we saw. There we go. Poor condition or old, widening cracks. So we could have had that, but we just decided to do something else. Small, she wishes she had a bigger workspace. Tick, we've written that as well. And she has to eat at the same table she works at. Tick, where do we find those? So we go small kitchen table. She wishes she had a bigger workspace, and that's what we put in our answer. Wishing she had a bigger workspace. So nice and simple. One word, one sentence to get the other mark. Untidy or cluttered, we didn't go with that, but we were close to going with that when we said about messy and untidy and small. And you could have used the evidence. There were piston rings and bolts and cylinders on the surface of the kitchen. Old-fashioned, it's a bit of a risky one, that, because it says about a cast iron stove, but modern houses sometimes have a cast iron stove. So I wouldn't have chosen that. I was trying to choose a basic word. Small, cozy, warm, messy would have been the 4 that I would have gone with. Isolated, I didn't find these quotes here. It is situated among fields. To go outside and watch the fields, I think it's risky. I'm going to put a question mark on there. I'm going to put a question mark on there. And safe, I don't think there's enough evidence myself to really be sure that it is safe. Yeah, the storm coming outside is dangerous. That doesn't necessarily mean the house is safe. So I really like these up here. They're basic words, but look at how simple the evidence is. It's old because there's cracks in the ceiling. It's small because she literally says she wishes she had a bigger workspace. It's cozy because there's a fire. That was one of the things we put. It's cluttered because it says it's cluttered. So you notice how simple it is to get those 3 markers. We'd actually written 4 markable points. We would have definitely got those 3 marks. Look down the base of the mark scheme here. Award 3 marks for 2 acceptable points, at least 1 with evidence. So you need to have these things. You need to have your cozy and small, right? But if all you did in the last 10 seconds of a paper is write, well, it seems like it's cozy, 1 mark. Or it seems like it's small, that would be a 2nd mark. You'd get 2 marks out of 3 for writing 2 words. If you then added evidence, yeah, great, you could get the 3rd mark. But I think you can see, if you keep it simple, you can grab those 3 marks with very little problem. As I've said at the end, so we've looked through that. We would have got 3 marks there. Of course we would. It'd be a bit of a rubbish guide video if you weren't going to get 3 marks. I wasn't going to show you how to get 3 marks. But I think the key point, the controversial point is, don't read the text first. Because you probably forget some of the things that you've read. And if you've got to quote from the text, you're going to have to reread it anyway, so that you quote directly from the text. You're going to have to find that bit that you knew anyway. And quote it perfectly, copy it perfectly. So you're going to have to reread it. And it takes loads of time. Even if you're a quick reader, it's taking up minutes that you could be scoring marks on. You're not going to be scoring any marks for reading the paper, enjoying it. And if you drift off while you're reading a little bit, you're wasting more and more minutes. Find the questions, find them in the text, write them down in a really simple way. Just don't overcomplicate the process. And read through some mark schemes. Learn what gets marks and what doesn't. You don't need complicated language. I don't think at any level you're making a simple point and you're backing it up. You have to remember that these mark schemes are standardized. So you need to be able to mark tens of thousands of children's papers. So they're going to pick words that lots of people are going to choose that are accurate. They're not going to require that you put the word dilapidated for Piper's house. It's far too specific. Put something general, simple, old. And actually, some of my high retaining children in class sometimes reach for those more tricky words, but it won't necessarily get you the mark. Just keep it simple. Back it right off. Keep it simple. Don't read the text first. If your teacher tells you you have to, that's up to them. They're more important. If they're your class teacher, you listen to them. But if you want to branch out and you're doing this on your own for a practice, maybe listen to me. It's worked in my classes before. I hope you have some success. Drop me a like or a comment or a subscribe, or send this on to somebody else if you think it would be helpful, and see if they can improve their reading comprehension results, even into secondary school, by using this tactic. Don't read the text first, keep it simple, and move on with your lives. See you soon for another video. Ciao.